This is Charlie Rauh with Acoustic Guitar, and today we're going to talk about an approach to composing for solo guitar using literature as the inspiration. So specifically, in this lesson we're going to talk about poetry and the simplicity that can be gleaned from that literary format and translated into music. Solo guitar is an approach to guitar playing that's often associated with virtuosity and asserting technical prowess. And I feel like there's more subtle ways to use the technique that we've spent so much time developing to compose. And I feel like literature and poetry, again specifically, can really yield a lot of inspiration there. So I'm going to take you through some examples that I've composed myself based on the poetry of Phillis Wheatley Peters, who in 2023 celebrated her 250th anniversary of being the first African American to be published. So she is a very important writer in my own life and inspiration, and somebody that I feel like is worth exploring musically because her poetry is very, very vivid and has a lot of imagery and just so much music within the words. So we're going to explore that and also explore the simplicity of a lot of her ideas and how she turns something simple into something grandiose. One way to think of that is very well encapsulated with a notion my late teacher, Connie Crothers, told me once, where something that's complex can be reduced to a simple foundation. Something that's complicated can't, and just sort of weaves in and around itself like a maze. So I feel like the complexity of poetry, like what Phillis Wheatley Peters wrote, can be translated into equally complex music that translates the intention of the poems and can really bring you into some interesting creative territory. So that's what we're going to explore in this lesson. On my latest project, A Hymn to the Morning, I explore the poetry of Phillis Wheatley Peters and attempt to translate the intentions of the poems as I understand them into solo guitar pieces. And one of the things I love about her poems is the imagery and the vivid descriptions that she uses. In this case, we're going to look at the title track, and where she's basically describing the early hours of the day and how she experiences them in her own life and on that particular day. It's a very simple concept. We've all seen the morning. She had seen the morning many times. But she chose this morning to really hone in on how wonderful the experience is and how it impacts her. And I think that's something we can all learn from as guitarists and composing for guitar, that we can take ideas that are often underestimated or overlooked, and we can turn them into something really fantastic. So one way I like to do that is using with my harmonies. So to do an E minor, a voicing like this, which we start with just an E on the 7th fret of the A, an open G, and then another G above it. And I like using voicings like this, particularly with an open G when allowed, because having an open string ringing in the middle creates a sympathetic harmony as you move up or down. So starting with the C minor, we can now move down and make our way to this, which is basically a C major 7. You could say a C with a high B over it, but also keeping that open G, but this time with an F sharp. Now, I feel like the use of an open string creating a minor second in the middle of moving low and high notes is a really interesting way to create a thoughtful sound. Having the counterpoint and the motion of bass and melody with dissonance in between it, to me, is a good way to musically represent contemplation or thinking. In this case, maybe watching the sun in the morning and thinking about previous suns or previous days, previous mornings, or future mornings, and what you're going to do that day. It's a way to subtly sort of inflect thought. So moving down, then up to this A minor, we now fret on the G string, but we keep that idea of an open string in between the melody and the bass by using the open B. So keeping that minor second or thoughtful interval in the middle of this ringing counterpoint is a good way to sort of get that across, get thoughtfulness across with momentum, which I feel like is something that comes across in the poems a lot. And it's also a very, simple way to achieve something complex. When you put these intervals, when you hear something like that, or something, our brains tell us that it's a chord we've heard before, but it doesn't exactly sound like when we hear, it's a way to use melodic voice leading and strategic use of intervals to do something really complex with simple means. So a way to use harmony to get at an idea in a less obvious way, but not really doing anything crazy, not using any really complex jazz harmony or anything like that. Just using very simple close intervals. So when you put all of it together, let's take a look at example 1. In one of the more minimal tracks on the record, I take a poem that Phillis wrote as an elegy for a child who died in her neighborhood. And these elegy poems that she wrote are among some of her most well-known. And they're really fantastic because it's her expressing just very deep empathy and, again, a lot of emotional depth, attempts to comfort the parents and just sort of express her own ideas on life and on death. So to try to translate such an intense topic coming from such a brilliant thinker and writer, I use a technique that I think of as sort of playing counterpoint to your own thoughts. So you take a very simple melody and you let it just be that, because the harmony is being created by what's going on in your own mind. So the idea behind this is not even to necessarily think of harmony or another melody that's counterpointing what you're playing. It could be, or it could be just your emotional reaction to what you're reading is the harmony. That is the idea. So what you're playing is going against that. You're being counterpointed by music and thought, but people only hear what you're playing. They only hear the simple melodic line. And this is a way to translate something in a very personal way that will get intention across in a way that's specific to you. Because you can play something and someone can learn it. Like what we're about to look at in the next example, I'll play a very simple line. We can all play it together, but it'll be different depending on who's playing it, because it'll be the counterpoint to whoever is playing it. It'll be the counterpoint to their thoughts. When you play this line, it won't be the same as me playing it, because I'm playing it against my reaction to this poem. When you play it, it'll be a reaction against something else. So we'll take a look at that in this next example. So now we're going to play a complete piece from the record. This is a lullaby I wrote called Her Morning Sun, and it's written about another one of Phillis's elegy poems. This was written about a 5-year-old girl who passed away in her neighborhood. And again, similar theme where she's consoling the parents, but in such a wonderful way, because it's not empty. She's not saying, "Oh, it'll be okay, it'll be." She's acknowledging the pain. She's acknowledging how awful it is, and she's not trying to get anyone away from that. She's looking it in the face. So, in this poem, she's essentially staring death in the face and explaining why death is not going to prevail. And that's a really amazing intention to try to translate musically. So to do that, I decided to not rely on the strength of the guitar, but rely on the nuance that a guitar is capable of. So again, to not use large chords, to not use sort of resonant, low, thick harmony, but also not to use frail harmony. I feel like there's a difference between music being frail and being delicate in a way, because to me, delicacy is a lot more nuanced than frail. It doesn't imply weakness, it implies nuance. And I feel like that's how Phillis writes, and it's definitely how she writes this poem. So I wanted to write a lullaby that, conveys the acknowledgement of pain, but also the hope that comes at the end of this poem, that's being offered to the parents of the child who passed away. And in order to do that, I use a lot of sort of, again, more delicate voicings, often without bass, and then introducing bass in more intermittent ways. So something like little jumps, things like this. Sort of outlining triads, often very simple harmonically, but also, again, delicately, and a little bit less obvious. So we're going to take a look at that and play Her Morning Sun in example 3. So that's a little bit on my methods of trying to translate the intention of poems that really move me into solo guitar music. And again, keeping a focus on the importance and relevance of simplicity, where you don't always have to play a lot to accomplish a lot, and that your harmony and your melodies can be very simple, and that doesn't make them less. Like, we don't have to be constantly asserting all the things we know how to do and reaching the heights of our technical prowess. Sometimes the real technique is understanding how to pull back and be restrained. And I feel like a poet such as Phillis Wheatley Peters can teach us that very well as musicians and as guitarists. So thanks again for joining me, and this is Charlie Rauh for Acoustic Guitar.